Then Jesus said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." I grew up in Coventry. In the middle of Coventry, there's a statue to Lady Godiva, who, so the story goes, rode through the city naked to relieve the tax burden on the citizens. And near the statue, there's a clock. And when I was a kid, I don't think it's worked for years, but when I was a kid, on the hour, a figure of Godiva would come out, go round, and an ugly face would appear above her. That was Tom. The only man, so the story goes, who looked at Lady Godiva as she was making her ride. And he's gone down to posterity as Peeping Tom. That's where the phrase comes from, Peeping Tom. Must be quite something, don't you think? To have your name go down in history associated with a particular word. Sometimes wonder what mine would be. Don't feel you need to answer that. Another one is Doubting Thomas. You don't need ever to have picked up a Bible to have heard the phrase Doubting Thomas, to hear someone described as a Doubting Thomas. And it's never a compliment. And it comes from this passage in the Gospel of John. After the resurrection, according to John, Jesus appeared to his followers in the room where they'd shared their last meal. But Thomas wasn't with them. And when they told Thomas that they'd seen Jesus, he wouldn't believe them. "I won't believe," he said, "unless I can put my finger in the marks on his hands where the nails had been, and put my hand into his side where the spear had been." And then a week later, Jesus appears again. Thomas is there, and Jesus offers Thomas the chance to do exactly that. Now, the way some people tell this story, it's almost as if Jesus is rolling his eyes and tutting, "Come on then, Doubting Thomas. Come on." Thomas seems to be held up to us as the kind of person we should not be as a Christian or as a religious believer. In fact, I've even heard it suggested that John put this story into his gospel simply to diss Thomas. But then a few years ago, it struck me there's something odd about this. At the end of this passage, Jesus says to Thomas, "You have seen and you have believed." Hang on, isn't that also true of the other apostles a week ago? They saw Jesus and they believed. It wasn't easy for them. Jesus even had to eat a piece of fish to convince them. So why single out Thomas? And the more I've thought about this over the years, the more it seems to me that if we think of this as shaming Thomas, as chastising him in some way, we miss one of the most beautiful encounters, not just in the Bible, but in the whole of literature. See, the thing is, we don't know much about Thomas. The only other time he appears in the Bible, also in the Gospel of John, is when Jesus is making his last journey to Jerusalem and his followers are with him. Jesus says that he's going to die, and Thomas says, "I will die alongside you. I will die with you." Now, there's no reason to think he's not sincere, any more than we should think that Peter was insincere when he said he would never deny Jesus. But when push comes to the shove, when those soldiers turn up on Gethsemane, Thomas runs for his life just as much as all the others. What does that do to him? He must have been devastated. He must have been crushed. Crushed by guilt and shame. Crushed by loss and pain. People were asking him to hope again, but for him, all hope got washed away on Calvary. They're asking him to believe again, but in doing so, they're asking him to visit somewhere that's become so painful to him. When Thomas fails to believe, it's not because he's cynical It's because he's broken. When Jesus says to him, come, put your hand in here, it's not to shame him. It's not to chastise him. This is a man facing a friend who is broken and saying, here, whatever you need, whatever it takes for you to be whole again, take it. You need to put your finger in my hand? Do it. You need to put your hand in my side? Do it. Whatever you need to find hope again, I am here for you. This isn't about shame or doubt. It's actually the most beautiful expression of love I think I've ever encountered. I think the thing with doubt, we talk about doubting Thomas. The thing about doubt is the opposite of doubt is not faith. The opposite of doubt is certainty. And if we've learned anything in the last few weeks, is that certainty can be in short supply in this world. Whether it's wedding and holiday plans torn up, whether it's this strange and separate life we've been living for the last few weeks, or, and it's worse, whether it's the pain of sickness and grief at the loss of a loved one. We've seen that life can throw us a curveball, into our certainties and our expectations. So where is God in all that? God is right there in this story. It's right there in Jesus reaching out for Thomas in his darkness and his despair. You see, we live in a world where bad things happen. And the Bible doesn't sugarcoat that. The Bible never portrays God as some kind of magic granddad who's going to wave his hand and make all the bad things go away and maybe throw in a worthless original with it. The Christian faith is this, that God came into the world in the life of Jesus Christ to experience exactly the uncertainties we experience, to suffer exactly the pains that we experience, to know exactly what it's like to live as a human being with all our worries and concerns and hurts and griefs. To be alongside us, just as Jesus is alongside Thomas in this story. But also, as a human being, to remind us that we can do this for each other. That we can be there for each other. So when the history of these times are written, let's make sure that front and centre are all those times when people have reached into their darkness and held on to others. All those times when folk have held the hands of strangers so they don't have to face their last moments alone. All those times when folk have reached out for others and said, I'm here for you. You don't have to be alone in this. All those times when folk have wrapped their arms around friends and colleagues who've thought that they can't go on and said, yes, you can. Because I'm right here with you. That is where hope begins. Not in philosophies or theologies or political plans, but in people engaging with each other and saying, we belong together. We face this together. Don't doubt, but believe. People sometimes ask me what belief in God is all about, and maybe it is this. Right there, the story of Jesus and Thomas. God reaching out in a human being and saying, whatever you need, I am there for you. Whatever you need to be whole again, I am there for you. But when we do that for one another, we are truly the children of God, made in the image of God, showing one another what the love of God is all about.